All right, hello everybody. So welcome to the first part of our trawl through Dr. Dave Regis's openings repertoire book. And the first two parts are going to be some games employing what's known as the Scotch game or the Scotch Gambit. So it's going to be some quite wild attacking stuff. And we're going to see some quick wins for the player of the white pieces. I have to say, if black knows what they're doing, then there's no reason for black to be scared of this. But at the same time, it's quite aggressive stuff, and you walk in a bit of a tightrope if you're playing the black pieces. You do have to be careful because white gets pretty quick development. And so let's go through. We're going to do 5 games in this episode, and then I think I'll do 6 in the next one, and then that will take us on to the next opening. So that should be fine. So here we go. This first game was played in 1995 in Zaragoza in Spain. Sometimes Dr. Regis gives us who played the game. So there's a guy called Jimenez with white and Matatofe with black. Never heard of them, but here they were playing a tournament game 26 years ago in Spain. So E4, E5, knight to f3, knight to c6, d4, e takes d4 is most normal here. There's no great advantage to black. If I just put the computer up, the computer's telling you it's the best move to take. You can play knight takes, but why would you if it's slightly better to just take the pawn with the pawn? So fine, e takes d4 and bishop to c4. Now the whole point of the Scotch is that you kind of leave this for the time being and you aim your pieces at this horrible weakness here. And white has a horrible weakness there as well, actually, but of course the advantage of the move means it's quite difficult for black to get at it. And in these openings, you're going to see this going to happen, this might happen, this at some point might happen, anything that can involve getting at this square. So bishop to c4 has been played, bishop to e7, why not? And now c3. And this is giving up another pawn, basically to get this one out the middle of the board. And you get your knight into the game. So, and it creates lots and lots of open lines. The other advantage of this move is it allows the queen to come out here and possibly threaten this square. So white sacrifices a pawn to get a lead in development and lots of space. So you can already see, compared to the openings that I normally play, and this is why I love this, that we got this resource from Dr. Regis so much, compared to the openings I normally play, completely different style of chess. So we've got c3. In this particular game, black decides to take the pawn. And white doesn't even take it back. White actually plays queen to d5. Here we go. We're aiming at this weak square. And if you have a bit of a look at it, it's not that easy to find a way for black to defend this. For example, if pawn here to create a square for the king, it doesn't work because queen takes is check. The king has to go to here, and then bishop d6 is checkmate because the king has no escape and the queen protects the bishop. Well, there is one way to do it, and it turns out that it's knight to h6, defending that way. But bishop takes seems to be winning the game, because now how are you going to defend this? And in fact, in the actual tournament game between these two, black resigned at this point. And yeah, but there's no need to. It actually turns out that black can struggle on a little bit. And what black should do here, it's quite clever. I'll put on show lines. We'll be using the computer as well. Is castle. What? Why? Well, okay. The first thing is this is no longer checkmate because rook takes queen. And the bishop is attacked. And black has this threat of pawn takes rook. So it turns out that the best that white can do is actually play bishop takes, because that's defending that way. Black may as well have the bishop because why not? And knight takes pawn from white. And the computer's telling you a bit of an advantage to white in this position. And why? Well, big time central control, lead in development, and the black's king is not safe. But having said that, only half a pawn advantage. So interesting. But yeah, a pretty typical kind of Scotch Gambit position, really. Say slight lead and advantage for white, and yeah, a pretty good game overall. Okay, so that's the first game we're going to look at today. Let's get another analysis board up here, and this second one. This time, Dr. Regis tells us this was played in Novgorod, so that's in Russia, 1998, between white as a player called Karpachev, which I can pronounce, and black as a player called Viflemskaya, which clearly I can't pronounce, but I did my best. Right, let's see how we get on. So E4, E5. Now this time we get D4. And this is the center game rather than the Scotch game, but actually they will transpose. So you could get exactly the same position as we do in the game with the knights first. It doesn't make any difference. So D4, E takes. Now you see knight to F3, knight to C6. So nice developing moves towards the, towards the center of the board. Okay, fine, typical stuff. Bishop to C4. Here we go again, pointing at this square. Bishop to C5, C3, same idea. Okay. And this time, black decides that instead of taking the pawn, to move this forward. This is quite a common idea in Gambit openings. So D3. And what's the point of that? Well, there's no way now for the knight to get to this square. So actually the knight has lost its best square in the position. So D3 looks quite logical, but of course we know that this is now possible. So queen to B3. And now we've got this battery again, just that this time the bishop happens to be in front. In the previous game, we had the queen in front, remember? So how do we defend F7? Well, with some difficulty. If you move the pawn, you just lose to bishop takes knight, rook takes, queen takes, and you lose a rook. So that's no good. So you can't do that. If you decide you want to try to defend with knight to h6, a bit like in the last game, well, this time bishop takes is just too good because there's nothing going on down here. So bishop takes h6 is just winning. But there is one move for black to keep the game going. And that is going to be the move. Sorry. Oh, yes, I was going to say I need to take the knight f6 move off the board. As I was looking at it going, that doesn't look right. Well, actually, the computer's giving two moves. It's giving queen to e7 and also queen to f6. Both of these moves are okay. And this is an example of what I mean when I say that, you know, the opening is okay for black if they know what they're doing. There's nothing wrong with it. So queen to e7, queen to f6 are both perfectly good moves because from those squares, the queen defends the pawn. So, okay, that's a classic example of the Scotch game. This time black, say, is safe. No problem at all. But I just want to stress, compare the mess in the middle of the board. I mean, look, there's a black pawn on d3, for heaven's sake. Compare the mess in the middle of the board to the really safe, solid system openings that I use. So there's a big style question here. If you open with e4, that's not e4, it's e5. If you open with e4 and you play things like the Scotch, you're going to get these quite complicated, wild games. It's really a style issue as to whether you want the complicated stuff. It certainly makes for very, very interesting chess. Okay, let's do the next game. And this is, where was this one? This one was played in Spain, 2001. Cueco Sanz is white and somebody called Santiago is black. So here we go. So e4, e5. Once again, d4 first, but remember knight f3, then knight c6, then d4 is perfectly okay. E takes, knight to f3, knight to c6. Bishop to c4, standard pattern, point at that square in this opening. And this time black tries bishop to b4, so giving a check. Okay, well, we're not going to play king f1 because that's dreadful. But we're going to play, let's just hide the moves. Don't want to have the computer help us unless something complicated occurs. The best move is this. And that's because it blocks the check and gains some time against the bishop. The bishop's now attacked. So what takes place? Well, black decides to play takes, and white doesn't bother taking the pawn back. White simply castles. Now, is that playable? Let's have a look. Well, the computer says, bizarrely, that leads to, pretty equal chances. Pretty equal chances, anything hovering around 0.00, yeah, a little bit for white, but it's pretty equal, a little bit for black, you get the idea. But it's an okay move. Now, black can play pawn takes here, but it's pretty scary. I mean, if you play this and then white plays this, you look at these pieces pointing at the black king, and the computer will know that it's okay and can defend. But if you're a human being, that's the last thing you want to have to do is deal with that. So black, not unreasonably, just develops instead. Just checking that's correct with what I've got. Yeah, and white decides to play knight to g5, which is, here we go. It's exactly as described, pointing at this square. And black castles, because that puts the rook onto this square as well. There's a problem with this, though. And the problem is that when you castle, you change the weak square from being this one to this one. Now, normally, you'd have the knight here, and so you'd have the extra defender, and that would also stop the queen from doing what it's about to do. And what it's about to do is go queen to h5. And now we've got problems because we've got 3 different pieces hitting this weak square, and we've got the threat of checkmate on h7, and there's really not a great deal black can do about it. So h6 is the best try, but after knight takes f7, you've got the threat of the knight moving out of the way with check. You're also already threatening the queen, so you've got to do something. The best move is given as rook takes, and after bishop takes, it's just a mess. I mean, you can see for yourself that the black king's under all sorts of attack. You're going to be able to take down here if you really want to, although I suspect there's probably better moves, but really, really nasty, huge advantage to white. So, okay, ouch. Let's get the next board and see the next game. So this time we've got an example of what might happen if black is careless, because in this game I'm pretty confident that black has better ways to defend. But let's have a look. So this was played in the Netherlands, so Holland, 2002. So e4, e5. By now you'll recognize the pattern for the Scotch opening. E takes d4, bishop c4, same old thing, pointing at this square. Is it going to be dangerous in this game? Well, black tries the bishop check again. White correctly blocks with the pawn again. Takes, takes. And this time, I have to say, and this is what I mean, black needs to know what they're doing. If black plays the bishop back here from this attack, it's perfectly okay. It's a pretty level game. But in fact, black in the game puts the bishop back to e7 and walks into this horrible move. Here it is again, battery on f7. And once again, there's just no real way to defend the square. How are you going to do it? If you play d6, you run into queen takes, king here, and bishop to e6 again. No good, checkmate. If you play knight to h6, which is the best move available, well, then bishop takes is just winning. You're just a straight piece up. You've still got to defend this square, so you're going to castle. But unlike in the other example, you've got no threat down here, so you just bring the bishop back and white's winning easily. What happened in the actual game, unfortunately for black, is black actually did play d6. So queen takes, the bishop's defending the queen, so the king has no choice but to go here. And then that's a rather pretty checkmate. So again, just bear in mind that in the middle of that game, though, at this point, if black plays bishop to a5, although the position is a mess, it's still pretty level. There's no issue here. But this is one of the fun parts of the Scotch and many of the e-pawn openings, but especially the Scotch game, the Scotch Gambit, is it's so open, it's so tactical that if one side does something silly, they're going to get into trouble pretty quickly. Okay, let's get our board reset. And this will probably be the last one for this video. So here we go. And e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, d4, e takes d4, bishop to c4, same old, same old. And now in this game, black tries knight to a5, so to attack the bishop. And white goes for a sacrifice that isn't actually sound. It doesn't work, but it's dangerous nonetheless. Again, if black doesn't quite get the defense right, then they get squished, which is what happens in the game. So the best thing for white to do here is play queen takes. And you just accept that you've got a much better position. So you think knight takes, bishop, queen takes, and just look what's happening. White's developed two pieces, has a center, is ready to castle. This bishop's coming out, whereas black has only moved two pieces and neither of them's on the board. They're both gone. The two pieces that black's moved are gone. They're not on the board. So no good. So anyway, knight a5 is played, and white doesn't in the real game do this. What white actually does is plays bishop takes f7, which looks really pretty at first glance, but doesn't actually work. As you can see, the computer can see its way through the mistake, or see its way through the analysis, if you like. So king takes is fine. And then white goes for the attack, knight e5 check. The king comes to e6. The queen takes on d4. So we're looking at moves like this now, which isn't particularly nice. And unfortunately for black, once again, doesn't find the right move. Knight f6 saves the game because it's guarding this square, so there's no check. But black tries knight to c6 and now gets into some trouble, as you can see, mate in 6. And here it comes. So queen to d5 check, supported by the pawn. So there's only one legal move for black, which is king to f. Sorry, no, there's two. He could go to f6, but goes to e7. Queen to e7 check, supported by the knight. Okay, now there's only one legal move, king to d6. Okay, well, there's no point in going back here and repeating moves. So white plays a different check, knight to c4. And where can the king go? Well, the only square is here, king to c5. And look how far the king is from home. It's not good. Queen to d5 check. Can't go there because of the knight. So the only move is king here. And now we actually end up with a checkmate via pawn. So there's check. The only legal move is here. And there's the checkmate. So look at that. We've managed to march the king across to the other side of the board. So once again, though, I really want to say there were plenty of chances for black to save this game. There was no reason to play knight a5. It's not a very good move. If you just play knight to f6, yeah, there's a tiny advantage to white, but that's, well, in fact, it's now decided it's dead level. But you expect that from the opening. No issue there. And even later in the game, where did we get to? At this point, if you play knight to f6, you're still okay as black. It's just an example of how dangerous this opening can be, particularly at sort of newer player levels. And with all due respect, a grandmaster is going to find this move. But at newer level players, this is open, risky stuff, interesting, exciting chess. Okay, we'll leave that there for now. That's got us halfway through Dr. Dave's example games on the Scotch. And I'll be back with the other 5 or 6 games on the Scotch next time. Thanks for watching.